They say K9 training days are routine. They say the dogs follow commands, stick to their drills, and never go off script. But that Friday morning in Oak Hollow Park, Officer Megan Ross watched her K9 partner Max sprint into the woods like something or someone was calling him from underground. And within 5 minutes, they found the shoe. A tiny mud-caked pink sneaker, half buried beneath pine needles trembling in the shallow hole Max had clawed open with frantic paws. The rest of the unit stopped laughing. This was no training exercise anymore. The sun filtered gently through the trees, casting golden dappled light over the quiet clearing. Birds chirped. Leaves rustled. It could have been a perfect fall morning. But Megan stood frozen, hand hovering near her holster, eyes locked on Max. As he barked louder and deeper, his entire body rigid, his front legs buried elbow deep in the dirt. "Max, heel," she called out sharply. He didn't flinch. Instead, he dug faster, then whined. Loud, urgent, like he was begging. Megan's boots crunched over fallen leaves as she ran to him. She dropped to her knees just as his snout scraped fabric. Pink, faded. She cleared away more earth. Her gloves came up dirty. Her breath stopped in her throat. It was an arm, thin, pale, motionless. "Medic, we've got a live one," she screamed. 10 minutes later, a medic team lifted the small unconscious body of a girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, from a shallow grave under a tree near the park's edge. She was breathing. Barely. No wallet, no ID, just the pink shoe. Her face was smeared with dirt, and her arms had scratches like she'd tried to claw her way up. But she was alive. They rushed her to County Memorial. Megan stood beside Max, stunned, one hand on his vest. "You just saved a life, buddy," she whispered, her voice breaking. Max nuzzled into her palm, panting hard. By noon, Megan was at the hospital, standing in the hallway, while nurses moved like clockwork inside the ER room. She could see the girl through the glass, unconscious but stable. The staff had cleaned her up, run tests. She had no signs of sexual assault, which Megan thanked God for. But she was bruised, dehydrated, and emotionally shattered. A nurse leaned out and said, "She woke up briefly, mumbled something, a name." Megan pulled out her notepad. "What did she say?" "Lacey," the nurse replied. "Said her name was Lacey." Megan's fingers tensed. That name wasn't familiar. She pulled out her phone and tapped into the missing persons database, both state and national. No match for a Lacey under the age of 10 reported in the last 90 days. No Amber Alerts, no files, nothing. How did a girl get buried in a park with no one looking for her? Later that evening, Megan sat in her cruiser. Max curled on the back seat, his muzzle twitching in his sleep. She stared at the little bracelet she'd recovered from the girl's wrist. It had purple beads and 3 faded white ones, with letters AVA. Not Lacey. Megan squinted at it. Was that her real name? Was Lacey what someone told her to say? Something wasn't right, and Max felt it too. By the way, if you believe animals like Max are real-life heroes, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals, where we tell true and inspired stories of courage, loyalty, and the powerful bond between humans and their 4-legged protectors. The next morning, Megan visited the hospital again. This time the girl was awake but quiet. Her eyes tracked every movement in the room, but she didn't speak. She clutched the blanket like it was her only shield left in the world. Megan approached slowly. "Hey, Lacey, I'm Officer Megan. I'm the one with the dog who found you." At the mention of Max, the girl looked up. "Can I bring him in?" Megan asked gently. The girl nodded once. Megan left, returning with Max, who walked in calmly, tail wagging, slow body language soft. As soon as he reached the bed, he sat beside it, placing one paw on the edge. The girl reached out, hesitating, then touched his fur. She didn't say a word, but her shoulders eased. Max laid his head beside her hand and didn't move. For the next 3 hours, the girl said nothing. But she did draw. Nurses gave her crayons and paper, and she scribbled furiously. Trees, a van, a shovel, a house with no windows. Megan flipped through the drawings quietly. One stood out. It showed a man and woman holding hands, but they had no faces. The girl had written beneath it, "They said they were my new parents." Megan's heart sank. Back at the station, Megan pulled up the National Adoption Registry. She cross-referenced dates, recent approvals, and out-of-state placements. She ran searches on the initials AVA. Nothing concrete, but she was forming a theory, a dark one. Someone had taken this girl under the guise of adoption, and someone had tried to bury her before she could speak the truth. That night, Megan let Max sleep at the foot of her bed. She usually didn't break protocol, but something about this case was different. Colder, deeper. She lay awake thinking about the van in the drawing, the windowless house, the bracelet with the wrong name, and a single terrifying question. If Max hadn't found her when he did, how many more were out there that no one even knew were missing? The hospital lights hummed softly as Megan sat beside the girl's bed, her notebook in her lap, and Max curled at her feet like a living security blanket. "Lacey," she said again softly. "Is that your name?" The girl didn't respond. She stared out the window, one hand still resting on Max's thick fur. She'd barely spoken all morning, just short whispered phrases that didn't match up. "They gave me the blue one," she'd mumbled earlier. "I didn't like it. But she said we don't get to choose." Megan had no idea what the blue one was. But it sure as hell didn't sound like a toy. By mid-afternoon, the story had started to spread, not officially, of course, but rumors move fast in small towns like these. "Did you hear about that girl they found buried? Was she dead?" "No, alive, barely. Dog found her right freaky smart one." At the police department, Megan sat behind her desk going through everything they had, which wasn't much. No fingerprints. No matches in the missing child registry. No hits on her DNA yet. Worse, nobody had reported her missing. Not locally, not statewide, not even nationally. If she hadn't told the nurse her name, they wouldn't even have that. But the more Megan thought about it, the more that name bugged her. Lacey, sweet, simple, almost planted. Later that evening, as she went to check in with the hospital again, a nurse met her at the front entrance. "She has visitors," the nurse said. Megan's brows shot up. "Excuse me, a couple. They say they're her guardians, brought paperwork. Look legit." That sent a chill right through Megan's spine. "Where are they now?" Room 208. Megan didn't wait. When she opened the door, the girl was sitting up in bed, stiff as a board. At her side stood a tall man in a gray blazer and a woman with perfectly ironed slacks and an oversized purse on her lap. Both turned to Megan with perfectly rehearsed smiles. "Officer Ross," the man asked. "We were hoping to see you. I'm Craig. This is my wife, Diana. We're Lacey's adoptive parents." Megan nodded slowly. "Mind showing me your papers?" "Of course." The woman reached into her bag and produced a printed folder. The guardianship papers were from an adoption agency, out of state, one Megan had never worked with. Everything looked clean, too clean, but something about their body language made her gut twist. The girl didn't look at them, not once, not even when the woman called her name. "Lacey, sweetheart, why won't you say hello?" The child just stared at Max, her tiny fingers twitching on the edge of the blanket. Max, meanwhile, stood halfway between Megan and the bed, stiff, silent, watching the man with laser focus. He didn't growl, not yet, but every hair on his back was up. Megan took a breath. "She didn't mention you." Craig smiled thinly. "She's been through a lot. We're just glad she's safe." "Where were you when she went missing?" Megan asked. "We didn't know she was," Diana replied quickly. "We were on our way to pick her up. Someone must have taken her." "Who we free worm?" "We don't know," Craig said a little too fast. "Maybe the caseworker dropped her off early or someone followed her from the agency." "The agency in Nevada," Megan cut in. Diana hesitated. "Yes." "That's strange," Megan said, flipping back through the file. "Your paperwork says the agency's based in Missouri." Both of them froze. It was subtle, but enough. After they left politely with fake smiles and hollow concern, Megan walked back into the room. The girl still hadn't said a word. Max lay beside her again. She curled against him like he was the only thing keeping her grounded. "Do you know those people?" Megan asked softly. A long silence. Then the girl nodded. "Once." "Are they your parents?" The girl shook her head. "Did they hurt you?" The girl hesitated, then nodded, slowly, barely. Megan closed her notebook. That was enough for her. Back at the station, she started digging. The agency listed on the guardianship papers was real, but the forms the couple presented didn't match the format of verified agency filings. She called in a favor from a friend in Missouri. Within the hour, she had confirmation no adoption file under the name Craig or Diana, and certainly no child matching Lacey. It was a forged identity. Whoever those people were, they weren't there to bring her home. Still, when she brought this to her superior officer, she didn't get the reaction she expected. "You have no proof they did anything wrong," Captain Brenner said. "The girl's safe. She wasn't assaulted." "We don't have a crime here, Ross." "She was buried alive," Megan snapped. "That seems like a crime to me. No evidence they did that. They lied about the paperwork." He shrugged. "Still not enough. You want to accuse people of attempted murder, you better come with more than bad vibes." Megan left his office furious. She returned to her desk and pulled the little bracelet from the bag again, the one with the beads that spelled AVA. It was all they had from the hole Max dug. The girl never called herself Ava. What if she didn't know her real name? What if Lacey was a name given to her by the people who buried her? She stared at the beads. then grabbed an evidence envelope and sealed a strand of the girl's hair inside. If no one else was going to figure out who she was, Megan would. At home that night, Megan sat on her back porch watching Max chase shadows in the yard. She could feel the weight of the day pressing on her chest. She'd seen a lot in her 10 years on the force, but something about this case got under her skin. Maybe it was the way the girl trembled every time someone in authority entered the room, or the way Max, usually calm and obedient, wouldn't let those people near her. She rubbed her face side and whispered, "We're missing something, Max." The dog came over and laid his head on her knee. The next day, she went back to the hospital. A nurse greeted her. "She's been quiet, but she's been drawing a lot." Megan stepped inside the room. The girl was sitting cross-legged on the bed surrounded by crayon-scribbled pages. Trees, vans, shovels, and a house plain white with no windows. One picture stopped Megan cold. It showed a woman standing by a van holding a clipboard, and two girls standing side by side, one with black hair, one with blonde. The blonde one had a big red X drawn through her. She said something strange, the nurse whispered as Megan stared at the picture. "Watashi masu?" She asked if we were going to pick another one now that the blue one didn't work. Megan stood in the doorway, silent. The little girl had gone back to coloring, her tiny hand pressing down hard with a red crayon, filling in the roof of the windowless house. The air in the hospital room felt heavy. The girl's last sentence echoed in her mind like a foghorn cutting through still water. "Are you going to pick another one now that the blue one didn't work?" "What did she mean?" Megan asked the nurse later in the hallway. The nurse shrugged uneasily. "I don't know, but she wasn't asking like a kid would. It was rehearsed, like something someone told her before." Megan stared out the window, her hands clenched tight in her jacket pockets. This wasn't a custody issue anymore. This wasn't a case of a missing child turning up under mysterious circumstances. This was darker, sharper, calculated, and her gut told her the girl wasn't the only one. Back at the station, Megan opened up a new investigation folder. No name, no file number, just unknown girl Ava Nash Lacey scribbled on the top. She started logging everything. Location where she was found, Max's response and behavior, bracelet marked Ava, drawings of van shovel windowless house, verbal cues blue one, new mommy and daddy pick another, and finally Craig and Diana Talbot, the couple claiming guardianship. Their paperwork still hadn't been verified, and their stories didn't match. Megan typed out a request for a formal background check. Then she picked up her phone and called the Missouri agency listed on the guardianship document. It rang 6 times. Then an older woman answered. Bright Path Adoptions, Karen speaking. "Hi, this is Officer Megan Ross from Oak County PD. I'm calling about a guardianship file you may have issued for a child named Ava, or possibly Lacey, to a couple named Craig and Diana Talbot." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm sorry, what?" They spoke for 30 minutes. And by the end of that call, Megan's skin crawled. There was no Ava in their system. No Lacey, no Talbot. Worse, the paperwork Megan had scanned and sent over was a forged version of an outdated form the agency hadn't used in over 2 years. "They must have gotten it from a third party," Karen said, her voice shaking. "We've had a few reports of unauthorized individuals posing as intermediaries. It's extremely rare, but..." Megan thanked her and hung up. This wasn't just identity fraud. This was child trafficking disguised as adoption. That night, Megan sat at her kitchen table, Max curled at her feet. She opened the envelope she'd sent out 2 days earlier, the private DNA test for the girl's hair sample. Results were pending, but the lab had already confirmed one thing: no matches found in national birth registries. The girl was a ghost, at least on paper, but someone had gone through a lot of effort to erase her trail and rename her. She thought again about that crayon drawing. The red X, 2 girls, 1 missing. What if Ava wasn't just a random name? What if there was another child and she was still missing? The next morning, Megan walked into the captain's office with the Bright Path confirmation and everything she'd uncovered. Brenner barely looked up from his paperwork. "We still don't have a crime, Ross." "Are you serious?" she snapped. "They forged legal documents. They tried to take a child who doesn't belong to them. She was buried in the woods, Captain." Brenner sighed. "Look, the DA's not going to prosecute a case without physical evidence linking them to abuse or abduction. That bracelet isn't enough." She said they picked her, like she was a replacement. "Children say all kinds of things under stress." "Max doesn't lie," Megan said coldly. That made Brenner pause. He looked up, met her eyes. "You're not the first cop to follow a hunch and get burned, Ross. I'll take that risk." Megan walked out without waiting for permission. She had Max's instincts. She had her own, and that was enough. She decided to pay Craig and Diana a visit unofficially. Their address was listed on the paperwork. A gated property out near the edge of town. Well maintained. Two-car garage. Big porch swing. Freshly painted. Everything looked too normal. Too clean. Max stiffened the moment they approached the door. He growled low, not loud enough to draw attention, but enough that Megan felt the hairs on her arms rise. She rang the bell. Craig answered, all smiles again. Well, Officer Ross. Didn't expect to see you here. Everything okay? I'd like to speak with your wife, Megan, said calmly. She's napping. I'll wait. Craig hesitated just for a second, then stepped aside. Inside the house smelled of lemons and new carpet. Too new. There were no photos, no toys, no signs that a child had ever lived there. I thought you said you were Lacey's legal guardians, Megan said, looking around. Craig nodded. That's right. So where's her room? Craig smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. Being painted. You know how these things take time. Megan's hand drifted near her belt. She didn't like this. Not one bit. Max sniffed the baseboard, then the hallway. Then without warning, he turned and bolted toward the back of the house. Megan followed. He stopped in front of a closet. Scratched once, sat down. Megan opened the door slowly. Inside, nothing but shelves of blankets. Except one shelf had a box. And inside that box, a child's t-shirt, a coloring book, zip ties, and a photo. 2 girls. One was Lacey. The other, blonde with wide eyes, looked younger. Maybe 5. On the back in red ink, March blue. Megan stepped back, heart racing. The girl had said the blue one didn't work. This was a selection system. These people weren't failed foster parents. They were predators. She walked back into the living room, face calm, voice level. Craig, I'm going to need you to come with me. He blinked. Why? Because if you don't, Max will drag you. Craig's mouth opened, but before he could argue, Max let out a growl that made the whole room vibrate. Craig raised his hands. Okay. Back at the station, Megan filed the report, secured the evidence, and called Brightpath again. Then she sent the photo of the second girl to missing child databases across the country. And finally, she sat down with the girl. Do you know her? Megan asked gently. The girl, Ava, not Lacey, nodded. She was before me, she whispered. She cried too much, so they picked me instead. Megan swallowed hard. And now? Hickey. They'll want another. The photo sat on Megan's desk like a wound that wouldn't close. 2 girls, 1 missing, 1 found. 1 with a red X. And on the back, 1 chilling word, March blue. The blonde girl had bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile. Her name, if she ever had one, was unknown. Megan had already sent the image to every database she could access. Nothing, no matches. Just like Ava. It was raining the next morning when Megan returned to County Memorial. She walked the halls quietly, boots squeaking against polished linoleum, Max trailing behind her. Room 208. She knocked once, open gently. Ava sat on the bed, her knees tucked to her chest, a blanket wrapped tight around her. Her fingers were stained with red crayon. Stacks of drawings surrounded her, dozens of them. Trees, always trees. Shovels, vans. And the same white house with no windows over and over again. Morning, Megan said softly. Ava glanced up. I had a dream. About what? A pause. The van, it came back. Megan sat beside the bed, Max curling up at Ava's feet. The girl reached down and stroked behind his ears with slow, careful fingers. You're safe here, Megan said. Nobody's going to take you again. Ava looked up, hesitant. They always come back. If one gets caught, they send another. Who's they? Ava's mouth trembled. I don't know names, just numbers. We had numbers. Megan's heart sank. What was your number? Ava held up 2 fingers. 2. Later that day, Megan sifted through the drawings back at her desk. One caught her attention. It was a wide field with 5 trees lined up in a row, each one with something beneath it. One had a red X. 2 were open circles. One had a stick figure drawn beside it, arms raised, eyes wide. The 5th tree was left blank. Megan turned it over. Ava had written a word in shaky crayon letters. Testy or so. Max sat near her chair, ears twitching. You know what this is, don't you? Megan whispered. He thumped his tail once slowly. She picked up her phone and called the lab again about the DNA test. Still pending. But now there was something even more urgent. She needed to find out where that house with no windows was. That night, Megan drove back to the place where Ava had been found. Oak Hollow Park. The rain had softened the ground again. Her boots sank slightly into the earth. Max jumped out of the cruiser, sniffed the air, then immediately headed off trail. Megan followed, flashlight in hand. They retraced the steps to the burial site. Max sniffed the soil and walked in a slow circle. Then he stopped, a nose pointed north. He didn't move. Megan crouched down. What is it, Wish? He whined once, sharp and low, then started walking. They followed a narrow wooded path for nearly a mile, leaves crunching softly beneath their feet. The rain had stopped, but the wind carried something foul, the kind of smell you don't forget. They came to a clearing half surrounded by trees. In the center stood a rundown storage shed, rusted metal roof, peeling white paint. No windows. Megan's stomach dropped. It was the house from Ava's drawings. Max's ears perked. He began pacing the perimeter. The place looked abandoned, but something about it felt wrong. Megan stepped closer and saw faint tire tracks near the entrance. Recent. She unholstered her weapon. Let's check it out. The front door was unlocked. It creaked open slowly, revealing a dark, musty interior. Broken furniture, splintered crates, some overturned chairs. But it wasn't empty. There were signs of recent occupation. A folded camping cot, crumbs on the floor, a used juice box, a paper plate with cartoon characters. Max sniffed along the wall, then stopped at a panel in the floor. He began scratching. Megan knelt down, heart pounding, and pried the board loose. Below was a trapdoor slightly ajar. She opened it slowly. A narrow set of wooden stairs led into a dark basement. Max growled deep in his throat. Megan flipped her flashlight on and descended. The basement was colder, damp, and lined with plastic bins, blankets, and more drawings taped along the walls like wallpaper. Drawings just like Ava's. One caught Megan's eye. It was a crude sketch of a girl screaming, arms tied. Beneath it, in child handwriting, too loud, had to go away. Megan turned slowly and saw it. A tiny shoe, same pink as Ava's, but this one had dried blood on the toe. She stumbled back into the light, chest tight. This wasn't just a holding spot. It was a testing ground. Whoever was behind this, they'd done it before, and they were planning to do it again. Megan called for backup crime scene and child protective services. She reported the shed and secured the area. They bagged every item, every drawing, every scrap. Max sat near the entrance, eyes scanning the woods. Even when the forensics team showed up, he didn't relax. He knew the scent of something still unfinished. Back at the station, Megan reviewed Ava's drawings again with fresh eyes. There were 6 houses drawn total, all identical, windowless white. Each one marked with either an X, a circle, or nothing. Ava had been number 2. The girl in the photo, likely number 1. But if there were 6, then there were still 4 children unaccounted for. And whoever was running this wasn't just forging documents, they were building something much more dangerous. Later that evening, Ava finally opened up again. Max was lying on the hospital floor like a furry statue. Megan sat beside the bed. They used to say we had to be quiet, Ava whispered. Because if we weren't, we'd be marked. Marked by Ava, marked how? Ava lifted her sleeve. A faint faded stamp could still be seen on her wrist, 5F. What's that mean? Megan asked. I think it means I was the 5th girl, F for female. Her voice cracked. There were boys too. They went somewhere else. Megan's throat tightened. Did you ever hear where? Ava looked down. They called it the bus house. I don't know where it is. Megan reached out and squeezed her hand. You don't need to know. You did everything right. You survived. Ava looked at her. But what if they come back for me? Max lifted his head as if he'd heard her. He stood up, walked to her side, and laid down again, closer this time. Megan smiled gently. They won't get past him. The morning after the shed raid, the department parking lot buzzed with quiet tension. Crime scene techs filed evidence. Local reporters were sniffing around. Megan kept her head down as she passed them, Max walking beside her like a shadow. Inside the squad room, everything felt colder, because now everyone knew. This wasn't just about a buried girl anymore. This was a system, and somewhere out there, it was still operating. Megan sat down at her desk and pulled up the digital case file. There were now 2 primary subjects. Ava, Lacey found alive. Unknown girl in photo status, presumed deceased. She added a 3rd line to the list. Potential for additional victim status unconfirmed. Then she clicked into the old database logs. A month before Ava had been found, a file had briefly appeared in the system, a missing person report for a girl named Emily Rhodes, age 5, blonde, blue eyes. She'd been entered into the system and removed within 24 hours. The note said recovered by custodial guardians. Case closed. No details, no follow-up. No name of who submitted the closure. Megan's jaw tightened. That kind of data manipulation didn't happen by accident. Someone with access had buried the file, just like someone had tried to bury Ava. She printed the record and walked down the hall to records. Hey, Paul, she said to the clerk. I need a hard copy of the Emily Rhodes file. Full intake sheet, physical description, witness notes if they exist. Paul frowned. That's odd. We don't have that name in the active system. I know, it was archived, pulled early. He tapped a few keys. You're right. There's a shell entry, but most of it's gone. Gone how? Paul leaned closer to the screen, like someone deleted it manually. Not just archived. Wiped. Megan didn't speak for a long moment. Then can you recover anything? Paul hesitated. Maybe. Depends on how deep they tried to bury it. Try, she said. This girl may be dead, or worse still out there. Paul nodded. Give me a day. Back in her office, Megan found Max lying by the window eyes following every movement outside. He hadn't been the same since the shed. He was alert stiff, listening to things no one else could hear. You still think someone's coming back, don't you? She whispered. His ears flicked. That was enough. She headed back to County Memorial, room 208. Ava was coloring again. This time the pictures were different. No more vans, no more trees. Just a single yellow school bus drawn over and over. Hey, Ava, Megan said, pulling up a chair. Can I ask you about the bus? Ava paused, then nodded. You said boys went to the bus house, right? Yeah. Do you know where that is? No, Ava said quietly. But they said it wasn't far. They said it was near the big signs. What kind of signs? Ava looked up. The ones with names of towns on them. Megan blinked. E-Highway. She pulled out a map of the county. Do you remember what the house looked like? Ava pointed to one of her pictures. This one. But it had an E on the mailbox. Megan stared at the drawing. A one-story farmhouse. No porch, chain-link fence, tires in the front yard. She narrowed her eyes, scanning the county border. A small service road split off from Route 9. Near it was an abandoned property listed under the name Everett. Mailbox marked E. She called it in. 3 hours later, she stood in front of that very house. Weather-worn siding. Trash blown up against the walls. No cars, no signs of recent movement. Max stepped out of the cruiser and instantly growled. Megan drew her weapon. Together they approached the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the place smelled like motor oil and mildew. Dust danced in the slivers of light streaming through broken blinds. In the back room, Megan found stacked cots, kids' shoes, a single bucket in the corner. And tucked in the kitchen cabinet, 6 school ID tags. 3 boys, 3 girls. All different last names. All homeschooled. Only one matched Ava. The rest names she hadn't seen before. She radioed it in 1032. Active crime scene. Child endangerment. Possible trafficking. Need backup in forensics at Old Everett Farm off Route 9. As she waited, she looked around the room again. Then her eyes fell on the refrigerator. Photos of children, smiling, sitting on steps, standing in front of barns. One even showed a boy holding a puppy. And in each photo, the same face appeared behind them, always blurred, always in the shadows. But Megan recognized the shape. It was Craig, still active, still hunting. The forensic team swept the house. Found no current occupants, but plenty of evidence, hair samples, food residue, fingerprints. More than enough to open federal charges. Megan watched as Max sniffed every room with laser precision. In one corner near a vent, he pawed at something. She knelt down and retrieved it, a necklace with a tiny plastic fire truck charm. Boys. No one had reported him missing. She felt sick. That night, Megan met with Ava again. Ava, we found another house, she said gently. You were right about the bus. Ava looked up, her voice barely a whisper. I told them I didn't want to go to the bus house. Megan touched her shoulder. You won't. But they said I failed the quiet test. Megan paused. The quiet test. Ava nodded. They'd listen at night to see if you cried or talked in your sleep. And if you did, Ava looked away. They'd take you in the morning. The next day, Paul from Records called. I found something, he said. The Emily Rhodes file, it wasn't just deleted, it was rerouted. Where were it? To an encrypted folder used by the County Social Services Division, the one that oversees foster care intakes. Megan's blood ran cold. You're telling me someone inside the system rerouted her file to keep it off the grid? Exactly. It was masked under a different case number. Who's sir? Paul hesitated. A judge's family court. Name's Harold T. Simmons. Judge Simmons. He'd presided over 300 adoption cases in the last 5 years. Suddenly, Megan remembered something. When she'd first reviewed Craig and Diana's paperwork, the signature on the guardianship form had been smudged but partially legible. It had read HTS. Now it all clicked. The network wasn't just private citizens faking documents. It was built into the system. Megan didn't go home that night. She stayed at the station preparing a case file for the FBI. This was out of their jurisdiction now, but she wasn't backing off. Max sat beside her the whole time. Every once in a while, he'd whine as if asking, why haven't we found them all yet? She reached down, scratched behind his ears. We're not done, boy. Not yet. The morning of the court hearing arrived cloaked in cold fog and quiet tension. Megan stood on the courthouse steps with Max at her side, both watching the entrance like sentries. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. The file in her hand said it all. Inside that folder were 6 months' worth of buried files, fraudulent adoption records, photos of missing children, and sworn testimony from Ava, who was now safe under federal protection. But more than anything, it held proof the trafficking ring was real. And the judge presiding over this morning's case, not Harold Simmons. He'd been quietly removed after a federal warrant hit his desk 2 nights earlier. The courtroom was silent as Megan stepped in with Max at her heel. Craig and Diana sat at the defendant's table with their high-priced attorney, still smug, still clean. The only thing out of place was the slight bruise on Craig's wrist from the night Max cornered him against the wall. Megan had no regrets. Ava sat in the witness room with a social worker and her therapist. She wouldn't testify today, she didn't have to. But Megan made sure she could hear the outcome. The federal prosecutor began the hearing with a heavy statement. These individuals manipulated a corrupt system, used fake identities to take children across state lines, and buried the truth along with the lives of 6 innocent kids. The courtroom held its breath. When it was Megan's turn on the stand, she spoke with calm fire. She told the court how Max broke formation that day during training, how he clawed into the earth and uncovered more than just a buried girl. He uncovered a crime no one had wanted to see. She showed the court the drawings, the files, the basement photos, the necklace, the initials AVA on a bracelet no one else recognized but the child. And she showed them Max, sitting quietly by the bench, watching, alert, a witness with no words but all the instincts in the world. It took 2 hours, but the decision was unanimous. Craig and Diana were remanded without bail awaiting trial for child trafficking, identity fraud, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. A cheer broke out in the hallway the moment the news reached Ava. Megan smiled. Max wagged his tail once. And outside, for the first time in weeks, the sky opened to sunshine. 3 weeks later, Megan sat in her backyard, a cup of coffee in her hand, and Max lying in the grass, belly up to the breeze. The investigation had since gone national. The FBI had opened a full-scale operation. More names had surfaced: middlemen, silent judges, and even 2 caseworkers who'd lost files on purpose. But more importantly, 3 children had been found. One of them was the blonde girl in the photograph. Her real name was Emily Rhodes. She'd been living in a basement across state lines, forced to memorize a new name and smile for photos sent to prospective parents. Now she was safe, with her real family. As for Ava, she was in a foster home with a retired teacher and 2 golden retrievers. Her therapist said she was drawing again this time, sunflowers and dogs. Lots of dogs. Megan planned to visit soon, but for now she just needed stillness. She looked over at Max. His ears twitched, nose to the wind. "You knew," she whispered, "all along." Max didn't move. Just blinked once. Megan smiled. He didn't need thanks. He didn't need medals. He just needed the next call. The following week, Megan was asked to speak at the K9 Training Academy's annual graduation. She stood at the podium looking at rows of new handlers and their eager dogs. She told them about the park, about the pink shoe, about the girl with too many names and not enough hope, and about the moment her dog stopped obeying commands and started following the truth. Afterward, a young recruit approached her. "Ma'am," he said, "how did you know to trust him?" Megan glanced down at Max. "I didn't," she said. "But he trusted himself. That was enough for both of us." They walked off stage together, handler and hero. No applause. No spotlight. Just the sound of a leash gently snapping into place. Thank you for following this story. If you believe animals like Max are more than heroes, that they're family protectors, and sometimes the only voice for those who can't speak, we're honored to have shared this journey with you. What would you have done if your dog led you to something the world wasn't ready to see? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, please consider subscribing to Heroes for Animals to support more true and inspired stories about the bonds that save lives. Until next time, stay safe, stay kind, and trust the ones who always know where to dig.